She was unfit to be his wife, the vampire king said, until he discovered she was all he ever needed. The night was heavy with mist, curling through the cobbled streets of the village like fingers of the unseen. Lanterns flickered in the cold wind, their light trembling across the faces of villagers who dared not speak too loudly. In the distance, a castle rose above the clouds of fog, its towers clawing at the moonlight, cold and silent. It was the seat of Kale, the vampire king, a man whose name alone sent shivers through the hearts of mortals. Ilara, a young healer with hair like molten chestnut and eyes the color of storm clouds, moved quietly along the path. She clutched her satchel of herbs and salves, her heart beating faster with every step. She had been summoned to the castle, though none in the village dared say why. Whispers spoke of a sick prince, of a task that could either bring honor or death. Ilara did not know if she should feel fear or purpose. The castle gates loomed ahead, vast and black as a shadow swallowing the earth. A guard, tall and silent, opened the gates with a clang that echoed through the night. "The healer," he said simply. "The vampire king allows you entry for now." Ilara nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. She stepped inside, the echo of her footsteps swallowed by the cold, empty hall. The air smelled of old stone and candle smoke. Shadows seemed to cling to the walls, whispering secrets that she could almost hear but not understand. At the heart of the castle, she found the Prince Kale's younger brother, pale and frail, his breath shallow. Ilara knelt by his bedside, running her hands over his trembling form. She murmured ancient incantations, whispered words older than the castle itself. Slowly, the prince's color returned, a faint warmth brushing his cheeks. From the darkness, a presence observed her. Kale stepped forward, tall, immaculately dressed, his skin pale as moonlight, eyes sharp as a blade. There was no sound but the quiet hum of the castle, yet Ilara felt the weight of him like a storm pressing against her chest. "You," he said, his voice low and commanding, "are not fit to stand here. You are weak, mortal, fragile." Ilara rose slowly, meeting his gaze. Fear tugged at her, but she held it at bay. "I am a healer," she said softly. "I do not seek power, only to help where it is needed." Kale's eyes narrowed, studying her like a predator observing prey. "Help, perhaps," he murmured. "Or perhaps you will falter when the weight of this castle of my kingdom demands more than your fragile hands can bear." Ilara felt the cold edge in his words, but also something else, a shadow beneath his disdain, almost like loneliness. She said nothing, only nodded, letting her actions speak where words might fail. For the next days she moved through the castle quietly, tending to the prince and performing small tasks. The castle seemed alive, its stones whispering secrets, its halls watching her. Kale remained distant, observing her with eyes that weighed every motion, every breath. Yet despite his dismissive words, there was an unspoken tension, a pull neither of them understood. One night, a scream shattered the silence. Ilara ran toward the sound, finding the prince convulsing, his body gripped by a dark curse that even her potions could not touch. Panic clawed at her chest, but she steadied herself, drawing upon every spell she knew, every herb she had carried. She whispered incantations, her hands glowing faintly in the darkness. Slowly, the convulsions ceased. Kale appeared silently in the doorway, eyes wide, something unreadable in their depth. He stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. You saved him," he said, voice tight with a mixture of disbelief and curiosity. "How?" Ilara did not answer, her hands still trembling from the exertion of her magic. She only looked at him, her eyes meeting his. And for a brief moment, Kale saw something he had not seen in centuries: courage, compassion, and a quiet strength that did not bend to fear. But pride and fear warred within him. He stepped back, raising his chin, hiding the trace of emotion that flickered across his pale face. "Do not mistake this for approval," he said sharply. "You are still unfit. A healer, a mortal, cannot hold the weight of this castle of me." Alara's lips pressed together, the sting of his words sharp, but she did not leave. She simply bowed her head and continued her work, letting her actions show what words could not. In the following days, Kale's fascination grew. He watched her in the gardens, tending plants that glowed faintly under the moonlight. He observed her in the library, tracing her fingers along ancient tomes, absorbing knowledge as though she were drawing life itself from the pages. And though he would not admit it aloud, he began to feel a pull toward her, something that defied his reason and centuries of solitude. Yet Kale's pride would not allow him to act. He called her unfit again, distancing himself with cold words, testing her resolve. And Alara, for her part, felt a strange mixture of fear, respect, and curiosity toward him. She could see glimpses of the man beneath the king, a man burdened by loss, loneliness, and a secret she could not yet understand. One evening, as the moon rose high above the castle, she wandered into a corridor she had not seen before. The walls were lined with mirrors, reflecting not only her image but faint shadows of the past, memories trapped in the glass, perhaps. She paused before one mirror, her reflection merging with the faint shapes of Kale's past. A vision flashed before her, a woman, bright and laughing, embraced by a young Kale, only to vanish into darkness. Alara stepped back, heart racing. She sensed the weight of the castle's secrets pressing on her, the lives and losses it had seen. And then, a soft voice behind her spoke, cold and sharp. "You see too much," Kale said, stepping from the shadows. "Curiosity is dangerous here." "I only wondered," Alara said softly, "why a king such as you carries such sorrow." Kale's eyes darkened, and for a moment the mask fell. She saw the loneliness, the pain, the years of solitude etched into his immortal face. He looked away quickly, regaining his composure. "You should not meddle in what does not concern you," he said, voice low, almost a growl. Yet she did not step back. Something unspoken passed between them, a recognition that the other was not as they appeared. And though he would not admit it, Kale felt the stirrings of something unfamiliar, something that terrified him, longing. The night ended with Alara returning to her chambers, her heart pounding. She could not shake the image of Kale, the cold king, the man hiding centuries of sorrow, the shadow of loneliness that even power could not erase. And Kale, alone in the mirrored corridor, stared into the reflection of a man he no longer fully recognized. The mortal who dared to stand beside his darkness had changed something within him. Hours later, as the castle slept under the pale gaze of the moon, Kale murmured into the empty hall, "Perhaps she is not what I expected, but perhaps she is exactly what I need." A whisper, barely audible, yet heavy with the weight of centuries and the pull of fate. And in that moment, both knew the story between them had only just begun. A fragile healer and a king of shadows, bound together by circumstance, courage, and a destiny neither fully understood. But destiny is never simple, and shadows linger where light begins to grow. The castle was silent in the early hours, except for the faint whisper of wind across the stone walls. Mist crawled through the corridors, curling around the torches and staircases like a living thing. Alara moved carefully, carrying a small bundle of herbs to the infirmary. The night had grown colder, and the shadows seemed deeper, as if the castle itself were watching her. She had spent the past days tending to the prince and exploring the castle's vast libraries. Every corner held secrets older than the village itself, forgotten histories, prophecies, and hints of magic long dormant. Alara felt a growing unease, as if she were walking on the edge of something immense, something that might change the fate of not only the castle but the entire kingdom. Kale watched her from the shadows, high above in the corridor balcony. The sight of her, so small and mortal yet so determined, tugged at something he had buried for centuries. He hated it. He hated the way her presence stirred emotions he could neither name nor control. She was mortal, fragile, unfit, and yet she had already proven herself stronger than many immortal warriors who had come before her. Why do you linger here so often? Kale's voice echoed down the corridor, smooth but sharp. Ilara started, dropping the bundle of herbs, but she quickly composed herself. I, I am gathering supplies for the prince, she replied, her voice calm despite the flutter in her chest. He is still weak, and I want to help him recover fully. Kale descended the stairs silently, his steps as soft as the mist outside. He stopped just behind her, so close that the warmth from his presence brushed against her. You have courage, he said, almost reluctantly. But courage alone does not prepare you for this place for me. Ilara turned to face him, meeting his piercing gaze. Then perhaps I will learn, she said simply. Her words were not meant as defiance, but Kale felt the sharp edge of her resolve as if it were a blade. Days passed, and Kale began testing her, setting tasks that seemed simple at first but quickly revealed hidden dangers. He sent her to retrieve rare herbs from the forest, guarded by creatures twisted by old curses. He asked her to decipher ancient texts in the library, some so cryptic they had driven scholars mad. Each task was designed to expose her limits, and each time she succeeded. With every success, Kale felt the walls around his heart weaken, though he would never admit it aloud. He found himself drawn to her presence, seeking excuses to watch her, to see her move with quiet grace, to observe the flicker of determination in her eyes. One evening, under the silver light of a full moon, Kale found her in the castle gardens. She was kneeling by a fountain, arranging herbs that glowed faintly in the moonlight. The air was cool and fragrant, carrying the scent of flowers that had not bloomed in centuries. You should not be here alone, Kale said, his voice low. The gardens are not safe at night. Ilara looked up, her eyes meeting his. I am careful, she replied softly, and besides the night is beautiful, it feels alive. Kale's eyes darkened, and for a moment the mask of the king slipped. He wanted to tell her to leave, to forget the beauty of this world and return to her mortal safety. But he did not. Instead, he found himself taking a step closer. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of danger. From the edge of the gardens, a shadow moved, swift, silent, and deadly. A figure stepped from the darkness, cloaked in black, and attacked without warning. Ilara froze for a moment, but instinct took over. She grabbed a vial of glowing herbs and flung it at the intruder. The explosion of light staggered him, but he was not defeated. Kale stepped forward, his presence a shield of raw power. The night seemed to bend around him as he moved, his hands striking with precision and speed. Together, they fought. Ilara's magic and Kale's strength blended in a seamless dance, each protecting the other. In that moment, the world seemed to narrow to just the two of them, bound by danger and necessity. When the attacker finally fled, disappearing into the darkness, Kale looked at Ilara. She was breathing heavily, her hands trembling, yet her eyes shone with a fierce light. For the first time, he saw her not as a fragile mortal, but as someone who could face death and still stand tall. You are reckless, he said, his voice tight, and yet you survive. Ilara's lips curved into a small, exhausted smile. I am learning, she said, perhaps more quickly than you expected. Kale's jaw tightened. He wanted to say more, to admit the stirrings of something he did not understand, but pride and fear held his words back. Instead, he turned and walked away, leaving her in the moonlight, her figure glowing softly against the dark stone of the castle. The following day, Ilara stumbled upon an old prophecy hidden in the library, written in a language she only barely understood. It spoke of a mortal who would awaken the heart of the vampire king, break the chains of his centuries-long curse, and bring light to the shadows of the kingdom. Her hands shook as she read the words, realizing that the prophecy might refer to her. Kale appeared behind her before she could hide the parchment. What have you found? He asked, his voice calm but his eyes sharp. Ilara hesitated. A prophecy, she said. It speaks of a mortal who will change the vampire king. It might mean me. Kale's face darkened. Prophecies are dangerous, he said. They are words written by those who do not understand the present. They are traps. I did not choose this, she said quietly, but perhaps it is my fate. Cale stared at her, the storm of emotions behind his eyes barely contained. He felt the pull of the prophecy, of her courage, and the strange connection that had grown between them. He wanted to deny it, to dismiss her as unfit, but he could not. Later that night, Cale wandered the castle halls alone, lost in thought. He recalled centuries of solitude, of power and fear, of ruling with an iron hand to hide the emptiness within. And yet, for the first time, he felt the stirrings of hope, fragile and terrifying. A mortal had touched something he thought long dead. Meanwhile, Elara could not sleep. The castle felt different now, alive with whispers and shadows that spoke of destiny and danger. She clutched the prophecy to her chest, feeling the weight of what it implied. She knew she was stepping into a world far larger than herself, a world where magic, power, and love collided. The next day brought new challenges. Cale insisted she train with the royal guards, testing her ability to defend herself. He watched her move through the exercises, her form precise, her reactions sharp. She was mortal, yes, but her mind and spirit were unyielding. With each movement, Cale's respect for her grew, though he would never admit it aloud. One evening, while studying in the library, Elara uncovered a hidden compartment containing an ancient mirror. When she looked into it, she saw not only her reflection but faint images of Cale, a man laughing centuries ago, a man grieving, a man who had loved and lost. The mirror seemed to whisper his story, showing her the depths of his sorrow and the walls he had built around his heart. Cale found her there, staring into the mirror. His expression was unreadable, but there was a hint of vulnerability in his eyes. "You see too much," he said, his voice low. "I see what you hide," she replied softly, "and I do not fear it." For a long moment they simply looked at each other, the air between them heavy with unspoken words. Desire, fear, curiosity, and longing mingled in the shadows. And though Cale tried to deny it, he felt the pull toward her, an attraction that terrified him. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the main hall. Elara and Cale turned, instincts alert. From the shadows emerged the figure of a man cloaked in black, his face hidden but his intent clear. He was here to claim the castle or destroy it. Cale's eyes darkened. "So soon," he muttered, drawing power from the shadows around him. "It seems the past refuses to stay buried." Alara's heart raced, but she did not step back. She stood beside Cale, ready to face whatever danger approached. The moment was electric, filled with tension, fear, and the undeniable connection between them. Cale extended his hand, a silent offer of partnership. Elara took it without hesitation, and together they prepared to confront the threat that lurked in the darkness. The night stretched on, heavy with the promise of danger and the stirrings of a bond neither of them fully understood. And in that silence, Cale whispered to himself, almost as if confessing a secret to the shadows. "Perhaps she is not only capable, but necessary. Perhaps she is the one I have been waiting for." The enemy advanced. The castle held its breath. And the mortal who had proven herself unfit to be a queen might soon become the key to saving not just the prince, but the vampire king himself. The castle lay under a blanket of fog, cold and silent, except for the distant howl of wolves beyond the forest. Shadows crept along the walls, stretching long and dark, as if the building itself anticipated the coming storm. Elara's footsteps echoed in the corridors as she hurried to the main hall, clutching the prophecy tightly. Cale was already there, his figure looming in the moonlight streaming through tall windows. His eyes were dark, unreadable, but his presence was like a storm, powerful, dangerous, and impossible to ignore. "The intruder knows more than I expected," Cale said, voice low and controlled. "He knows of the curse, of the prophecy of us." Elara shivered, realizing the full weight of her position. She was not just a healer or a visitor to this castle. She was now part of a destiny that could change the fate of kingdoms. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice trembling yet firm. Kale's gaze softened briefly, a flicker of vulnerability that no one else had ever seen. "We face him," he said, "together." The intruder moved like a shadow, silent and swift. Kale led Alara through secret passageways beneath the castle, their footsteps muffled on the cold stone floors. The air smelled of earth and old magic, thick with the weight of centuries. "Why do you stay close to me?" Kale asked suddenly, his voice almost a whisper as they paused in the darkness. "You are mortal, you could run, you could leave." Alara looked up at him, meeting his intense gaze. "Because I believe in what we are fighting for," she said softly. "Because I trust you." Kale's chest tightened. Trust was foreign to him, a fragile thing he had long since abandoned. And yet, hearing those words from her, feeling the warmth of her hand brushing against his as they moved, something inside him shifted. He wanted to deny it, to push her away, but he could not. They reached the edge of the catacombs beneath the castle, where the intruder awaited. The man stepped forward, cloaked in black, face hidden, but eyes glowing faintly red in the torchlight. He held a weapon that shimmered with dark magic. "You should not have come here, King," the intruder said, voice like gravel. "And you, mortal, do not think you can interfere." Kale's hands moved like lightning, drawing power from the shadows around him. The air shifted, heavy and electric, as he prepared for battle. Alara steadied herself, her hands glowing faintly with the magic she had learned. Together, they moved in unison. Kale struck with precision and speed, while Alara's magic flared like sunlight in the darkness. The intruder lunged, but they were ready. For every strike he made, Kale blocked, and Alara countered with bursts of light that forced him back. During the fight, Alara noticed something strange. The intruder seemed to know their every move, anticipating them. He laughed softly, a sound that sent chills down her spine. "You think you can protect each other," he said. "You are bound by more than friendship, and that is your weakness." Kale's eyes narrowed. He realized the intruder knew something of their bond, perhaps even of the prophecy. He glanced at Alara, seeing her determination, her courage, her unyielding spirit. And for a moment he felt something he had not felt in centuries, fear not for himself but for her. The battle raged on, light and shadow clashing in a dance that seemed to blur the line between life and death. Alara's magic flared, a brilliant glow that illuminated the catacombs, and Kale moved through the shadows, striking with deadly precision. The intruder faltered, then recovered, more dangerous than before. In the chaos, Kale caught Alara's hand. "Stay close," he shouted. "Do not let him separate us." She nodded, heart pounding, and they fought as one. Each glance, each movement, each word was a silent conversation between them. For the first time, Kale allowed himself to rely on someone else, and the realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. Finally, with a burst of magic from Alara, the intruder was forced back, stumbling into the shadows. Kale's hand gripped her shoulder, steadying her. "Are you unharmed?" he asked, voice softer than usual. Alara nodded, though her body trembled. "I am, but he knows too much," she said. "We must find out who he really is and why he wants the castle." Kale's face darkened. "He is part of my past," he said, voice low. "Something I thought long buried, and now it has returned." They descended deeper into the catacombs, following faint traces of magic that led to an ancient chamber. The walls were covered in inscriptions, glowing faintly with the same light as Alara's magic. She reached out to touch them, feeling a pulse of energy run through her. "This magic," she whispered, "it is old, older than the castle itself." Kale's eyes scanned the inscriptions, recognizing symbols he had not seen in centuries. "It is tied to my curse," he said, "and perhaps tied to you." Alara looked at him, confusion and fear mingling with curiosity. "To me?" Kale nodded slowly. "Your presence here is no accident. The prophecy, the magic, you are meant to help me, perhaps even save me." Alara's heart raced. She had known she was part of something larger, but hearing Kale say it aloud made it real. And yet, fear gnawed at her, the weight of destiny, the danger, and the bond forming between them was more than she had ever faced. For a long moment they stood in silence, the glow of ancient magic bathing them in soft light. Kale reached out, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. "Do not fear," he whispered. "I will protect you. I will not let harm come to you." Alara felt a warmth she had not known before, a sense of safety and belonging in his presence. And yet she also knew that danger was not gone, only delayed. Suddenly, the intruder's voice echoed through the chamber. "You cannot hide from the past, Vampire King." "And neither can she." Kale's eyes darkened. "Show yourself," he commanded, his voice echoing like thunder. From the shadows, the intruder stepped forward. This time his face was visible, pale, scarred, and twisted with anger. "I know your secrets, Kale," he said. "I know the weakness you hide, and I will use it to destroy you." Alara's hand found Kale's, gripping tightly. "We will face him together," she said, her voice steady despite the fear curling in her chest. Kale nodded, feeling the strength in her resolve. For the first time, he realized that this mortal, this healer, was not only his ally but also his anchor. Her courage gave him strength, her presence gave him hope, and her heart was a light he had not known he needed. The intruder advanced, shadows twisting around him, magic crackling in the air. Kale stepped in front of Alara, protective and fierce. "You will not harm her," he said, voice low and deadly. Alara's magic flared again, a brilliant light that pushed back the shadows. The intruder staggered, but he was not defeated. "You are both fools," he hissed. "You cannot escape what is coming." Kale's eyes blazed. "Then we will meet it together," he said. The chamber shook with the force of their combined power. Light and shadow collided, ancient magic flaring around them, filling the air with a brilliance that was almost blinding. In that moment, Alara and Kale were bound not only by battle but by an unspoken connection, a bond forged in fire and shadow, fear and trust. As the intruder retreated into the darkness, vanishing as suddenly as he had appeared, Kale turned to Alara. "You have done well," he said, his voice soft, almost gentle. "You are stronger than I imagined and perhaps stronger than I am willing to admit." Alara looked at him, her chest heaving. "I do not want to be stronger than you," she said softly. "I want to stand with you, side by side." Kale's gaze lingered on her, something ancient and powerful stirring in his eyes. "Side by side," he repeated, almost as if testing the sound of the words. "Yes, side by side." For a brief moment the world felt still. The danger had passed for now, and the castle, the shadows, and the moonlight seemed to hold their breath. But Kale knew the intruder's words were true. The past was not gone, and the prophecy's warning was real. He glanced at Alara, realizing that the bond between them, fragile as it was, could be their greatest strength or their greatest vulnerability. As they left the chamber, walking through the silent corridors, Kale felt a pull toward her, an undeniable force that both frightened and thrilled him. He wanted to speak, to tell her how he felt, but the words would not come. Pride and fear kept them locked in a delicate dance, their hearts moving closer yet separated by centuries of doubt. Alara sensed his struggle, her hand brushing against his in passing. "We will face what comes," she said softly. "Together." Kale nodded, his chest tight with a mixture of longing and fear. "Together," he echoed. But in the shadows of the castle, far above the towers, a pair of eyes watched, patient, calculating, and filled with malice. The intruder was not finished. The danger was far from over. And as the moon cast its silver light over the castle, Alara felt a shiver of foreboding. She did not yet know how deep the danger ran, or how much of her heart would be claimed by the Vampire King before the trials were over. The dawn broke slowly over the castle, a pale light brushing the towers and misted gardens. The air was heavy with anticipation, as if the world itself held its breath. Within the walls of stone, Kale stood in the throne room, his eyes scanning the horizon. The intruder's threat still lingered, a shadow on the edge of every thought, a reminder that the past had not yet released its grip. Alara approached quietly, her hands still glowing faintly from the magic she had summoned in the catacombs. She had spent the night preparing, studying ancient spells and the inscriptions she had discovered. Her heart was steady, but her mind raced. She knew that the next battle would demand everything she had: her courage, her skill, and the strength she had not fully realized she possessed. "You are ready," Kale said softly, not turning to face her. The weight of centuries in his voice, the cold majesty of his presence made her chest tighten. "But this fight, it will not only test your magic, it will test your heart." Alara met his gaze. "Then we face it together," she said. Her voice held no fear, only determination. She could see the tension in him, the fear he refused to admit, fear not for himself but for her. Kale's lips pressed into a thin line. "Together," he repeated. They moved through the castle, the corridors alive with shadows that seemed to watch them pass. The intruder had returned, leaving signs of his presence: flickering torches, traces of dark magic in the air, a silence heavy with malice. At the edge of the northern tower, the intruder appeared again, his cloak trailing in the wind, eyes glowing with a cruel light. "So you brought her," he sneered. "The mortal, the healer. Do you truly believe you can stand against me?" Kale stepped forward, the air around him thick with power. "She is no mere mortal," he said, his voice echoing through the tower, "and you will not harm her." Alara felt her magic flare in response, a warmth spreading from her chest to her hands. The bond between them, silent, unspoken, yet undeniable, gave her strength. She had never felt so alive, so connected to another being. Kale's presence anchored her and her power amplified his. The intruder lunged, dark energy crackling around him. Kale moved like a shadow, striking with precision, while Alara unleashed waves of light that met his darkness. The tower shook under the force of their battle, stones cracking and dust swirling. "You are strong," the intruder hissed, dodging their combined attacks. "But strength alone cannot save you." Kale's eyes flickered to Alara. "Then we fight as one," he said. And for the first time, he allowed himself to fully trust her, to let their bond guide their movements. Alara stepped closer, their hands brushing. A surge of warmth shot through both of them, and the shadows around Kale seemed to respond, bending, twisting, as if acknowledging her magic. Together they moved in harmony, their actions a dance of light and shadow, power and precision. The intruder faltered, surprised by the synergy between the mortal and the king. "Impossible," he whispered. You should not be able to." Alara pressed her hands together, her magic flaring brighter than before. "We are stronger together," she said, her voice ringing with certainty. "And your darkness cannot break what we have found in each other." Kale felt something he had never felt in centuries: hope. He realized with a clarity that stunned him that Alara was not just part of the prophecy. She was his anchor, his light, and the one who could help him heal the centuries of solitude he had carried. With a final, synchronized strike, they sent the intruder crashing into the tower wall. He vanished into shadows, leaving behind only a faint echo of malice. The threat had been defeated for now. Kale turned to Alara, his chest rising and falling, not from exhaustion alone, but from the overwhelming emotions that surged through him. He had fought alongside many warriors, faced countless threats, yet nothing had ever touched him like this: the bond he shared with her, the feeling that together they were unbreakable. Kale began, but paused, the words caught in his throat. Vulnerability, fear, longing, all emotions he had long buried pressed against him. "You are more than I imagined." Alara reached up, gently brushing her hand across his cheek. "I am here," she said softly, "and I will stay if you let me." Kale's eyes softened, the shadows of centuries lifting slightly. I called you unfit," he admitted, voice low. "But I was wrong. You are everything I have ever needed." The words hung in the air, a promise, a confession, and a revelation all at once. Alara felt tears prick her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief and joy that came with being seen, understood, and accepted by someone she had come to love. The castle itself seemed to respond to the shift, the ancient stones humming faintly, the shadows receding. The curse that had haunted Kale for centuries, the loneliness, the isolation, the fear of losing those he cared for, began to lift, not completely, but enough for him to feel warmth, to feel hope, to feel connection. They moved to the highest tower, overlooking the misted valley below. The sun began to rise, casting golden light across the land. Kale took Alara's hands in his, holding her close, their foreheads touching. "I have ruled for centuries, yet I never knew what I was missing," Kale whispered. You have awakened something in me, something I thought lost forever." Alara smiled softly, resting her head against his chest. "And you have given me a place where I belong," she said. "A home and a heart to protect." For a long moment they simply stood together, the world bathed in light, the weight of the past lifted, if only slightly. Kale realized that the greatest strength he had was not in his power, nor in his immortality, but in the bond he shared with her. And Alara understood that courage and love could illuminate even the darkest of shadows. But even in this moment of triumph, the prophecy lingered in their minds. The kingdom was safe, the intruder defeated, yet the whispers of magic and destiny reminded them that life was never simple, and that the path of love and power was rarely without challenge. Kale turned to her, a faint smile playing on his lips. "We have faced darkness," he said, "and yet we are here, together. Perhaps the castle, perhaps the kingdom can finally know peace." Alara nodded, feeling the truth of his words. She had faced fear, danger, and the unknown, and through it all they had stood together. Her heart swelled with love and determination. "And if darkness returns," she asked. Kale's hand tightened around hers. "Then we face it." "Together," he said, his voice steady, strong, and filled with a promise that no shadow could touch. As the sun rose fully over the misted valleys, Kale and Alara stood side by side on the castle's highest terrace. Their hands intertwined, their hearts aligned, and their spirits bound by the trials they had endured. The Vampire King, once a figure of solitude and fear, had found redemption in her courage and presence. And the mortal healer, once deemed unfit, had proven that love, strength, and destiny were never bound by what the world expected. Kale gazed at her, eyes bright with a clarity he had never known. "I called you unfit," he repeated softly, as though testing the truth of it. "And yet you are all I have ever needed." Alara smiled, tears glinting in her eyes as the sunlight caught them. "And you are more than I could have imagined," she replied. "Stronger than the darkness and braver than the fear." The castle, ancient and alive with magic, seemed to exhale. The shadows lifted, the air shimmered with possibility, and the dawn of a new era began, an era where the Vampire King and the mortal healer would rule not only with power but with courage, trust, and love. And yet, somewhere in the distant mountains, a faint shadow lingered, a reminder that destiny was never fully complete, and that the future would always hold challenges, even in times of peace. But for now, Kale and Alara embraced, their hearts full, their bond unbroken and their spirits intertwined. They had faced darkness, discovered love, and learned that strength was not measured by solitude or power, but by courage, trust, and the willingness to stand together. And under the golden light of dawn, with the castle standing proud behind them, the Vampire King and the healer finally understood the truth. Some fates are not chosen but discovered, and some loves are not expected but essential.